I spent $72,000 to finance my successful son's perfect life, and the night he called me useless, I chose to bankrupt his lie. There are nights that change everything. Not with a sudden crash, but with the quiet, devastating sound of a carefully constructed lie imploding. This was that night. A cold December evening in an expensive Upper East Side apartment, packed with the polished, wealthy family of my daughter-in-law, Tiffany. I stood there, a retired teacher from Brooklyn, holding a 6-year secret that was about to be unleashed. The moment of confrontation arrived, sharp and cruel. My son, Robert, was speaking to the table, and then directed his gaze at me, a cold, entitled smile on his face. He delivered the line that shattered years of silent, guarded dignity. "How does it feel?" he asked, his voice low but audible across the linen tablecloth, "to be completely useless, Mom?" I smiled back a smile of pure, terrifying liberation, and replied with the sentence that detonated his perfect world. "It feels like never having to pay your $3,000 rent again." The silence was immediate and complete. Robert's face drained of all color. Tiffany, choking on her expensive wine, yelled, "What rent? What rent are you talking about?" This was the reckoning for a colossal financial and emotional deception. My name is Rebecca Miller. I am 59 years old, a retired public school teacher, and the mother who had been silently bankrolling my only son's life for 6 years. The secret was simple. For 72 consecutive months, I had transferred $1,000 to Robert's bank account to cover a portion of the rent for his lavish Chelsea apartment. He was living a lie of affluence for Tiffany and her Manhattan social circle, and I was the invisible, impoverished financier. On this night, in front of Tiffany's established parents and her elegant sisters, the $72,000 secret, the truth of my crippling sacrifice, came tumbling out like a sudden, undeniable confession. For context, this dynamic is documented by organizations like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, as a form of elder financial exploitation. While often less visible than outright fraud, the exploitation of a parent's unconditional love for sustained financial gain by an adult child is a common and destructive pattern. My fixed income, derived from my modest teacher's pension, was systematically diverted from my own essential needs to maintain his costly image. My dignity rested on my financial independence, and Robert had steadily, meticulously dismantled it. To fully grasp the magnitude of the 6-year deception, we must rewind. The story begins with Robert meeting Tiffany. She came from a family defined by inherited money, possessing the automatic security that famous last names provide. I, Rebecca Miller, lived in my modest house in Brooklyn, the same home where I had raised Robert alone after his father died suddenly when Robert was 8. Robert worked respectably as an engineer, but his salary was not the large sum he had fabricated for Tiffany's consumption. A mother always possesses the intuition to know when her son is building a life on a foundation of fundamental dishonesty. When Tiffany first came to my home for dinner, her assessment of my life was purely financial. Her eyes calculated the wear on my antique furniture, the simplicity of my floral curtains, the age of my inherited china. She did not speak the criticism, but her gaze was a detailed, cold ledger that found my life wanting. Robert, standing between his two incompatible worlds, offered only a nervous smile and changed the subject, failing to defend either his mother or his home. That moment was the first, ignored warning. The inevitable confrontation came one Sunday afternoon, 1 month before their wedding. Robert arrived with the heavy, apprehensive look I recognized from his childhood when he needed a significant, immediate intervention. We sat on the patio beneath the purple wisteria vine I had planted when he was born. "Mom," he confessed, unable to meet my eyes, "Tiffany and I need to rent an apartment in Chelsea. It is a nice 2-bedroom with a balcony. She is accustomed to a certain standard, and my income is not exactly what I have led her family to believe." The question I asked was driven by immediate, cold dread. "How much is the monthly rent?" $3,000 a month, he stated. The number was a shock. It was nearly the entirety of my monthly fixed pension income. Robert explained his calculated solution. He could cover $2,000. He needed me to supply the final $1,000 every month. He swore it was temporary, a short-term necessity, until he secured the inevitable promotion. The rational choice was clear. He needed to find a cheaper, more financially sensible apartment. But Robert's anxiety about his social image superseded logic. Tiffany already informed her parents about the Chelsea apartment. She showed them pictures. "If we move to something less expensive, they will immediately know I lied about my salary. Please, Mom. Just 1 year. I absolutely swear to you." That afternoon, under the wisteria, I made the single most destructive mistake of my life. I agreed. But Robert added the crucial condition, the core of the financial betrayal. Tiffany absolutely cannot know you are helping me. She must believe I pay for everything myself, or she will consider me a total failure. And so began my protracted, ruinous silence. Every first of the month, $1,000 money designated for my own necessary house repairs, my medications, and my retirement was transferred to his account. The $1,000 was a direct, monthly amputation of my future financial security. He promised 1 year. 1 year became 2, 2 became 3, and by the end of the 6th year, my personal savings were entirely gone. The money was gone, and the betrayal was just beginning. Before the money took over, the years of pure, unconditional love served as the bitter counterpoint to the exploitation. I remembered Robert at 7, spilling orange juice on his way to my bed, his crooked smile declaring me the best mother in the world. I remembered the study sessions and the late-night talks about the universe beneath the kitchen light. When his father died, Robert, an 8-year-old boy, solemnly promised, "Now I am going to take care of you, Mom." For years, that promise felt true. I worked double shifts, sacrificing every comfort to ensure his success, accepting every struggle as an act of pure love. When he graduated college, I felt the validation of my sacrifice. "Thank you, Mom," he said that night. "Without you, I would be nothing." I treasured those words. The relationship only faltered when he met Tiffany. I had hoped for grandchildren and shared family gatherings, but Tiffany's arrival changed everything. She was beautiful, dressed in expensive clothes, but her assessment of my house, calling it merely authentic, revealed the underlying contempt for my modest reality. Robert, prioritizing her approval, began the rapid, financially unsustainable transition into a designer lifestyle, ignoring my subtle warnings about his escalating expenses. 1 month after his engagement, he presented his financial emergency, his need for the rent subsidy, and I, the mother, chose the path of destructive silence. The first year was difficult, marked by my financial rationing: no meat, no new clothes, no senior gym membership. Every sacrifice was justified as a temporary measure for my son. Robert maintained contact, calling weekly, always avoiding the subject of the money, preserving the secret that bound us in a shameful silence. His visits, however, became increasingly sporadic, the family plans with Tiffany always taking precedence over his Sunday commitment to me. The emotional abandonment was subtle, but constant. The definitive break came on Mother's Day of that first year. I spent the day preparing my famous turkey chili, setting the table with my best embroidered linen, buying fresh purple flowers. Robert confirmed his attendance. "We'll absolutely be there, Mom, at 2 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, his call came. Tiffany had organized an immediate, unplanned lunch with her family, and he simply could not say no. He terminated the call before I could respond. I sat alone at my perfectly set table, staring at the chili, and the true gravity of the situation hit me. I was no longer a priority. I was an afterthought, an obligation easily dismissed when his social image required it. I cried that day, not for the food, but because I understood I had been systematically relegated to a secondary status in the life I was actively funding. He returned the following week with flowers and chocolates, offering the predictable apology. "You know how Tiffany is with her family, Mom." I forgave him, but the crack was permanent. The year of payments ended, and I called him, desperately seeking the promised conclusion. "Robert, a year has passed. The rent money." His response was immediate deflection. "Mom, things are financially tight. I just paid Tiffany's expensive tuition. Give me a few more months." When I mentioned my own pressing financial needs, including a leaking water heater, he shut down the conversation with a cold reprimand. "Mom, please, do not make me feel guilty. I am under enough intense pressure as it is." He hung up. I knew the relationship was breaking, but I continued the payment. A mother does not abandon. By the 3rd year, his distance was nearly complete. When I suggested visiting them, there were always excuses. Remodeling, migraine, dinner with friends. The lie had become a deep emotional chasm between us. The lie was costing me everything, and I was still unable to say no. The following part will detail the years of physical cost, the crucial moment I sacrificed my health, and Robert's final, shocking financial demand that pushed me to the edge. The geography of Robert's deception was the fundamental class divide of New York City, my modest stability in Brooklyn, versus the unsustainable pretense of Manhattan affluence. Robert, an engineer with a respectable but limited salary, found himself unable to bridge this gap naturally, forcing him to fund his image with a lie. Economic data from that period confirmed that the average cost of living and the median income in a place like the Upper East Side, where Tiffany's family resided, existed in an entirely different financial stratosphere compared to a long-established Brooklyn neighborhood. Robert's ambition or his shame drove him to try to buy his way into Tiffany's orbit. This tragedy began simply with the introduction of Tiffany. She was instantly defined by her family's inherited money and the automatic social security that wealth provides. I, Rebecca Miller, lived in the modest Brooklyn home where I had painstakingly raised Robert alone since his father's sudden death when Robert was 8 years old. Robert's salary was adequate, but I knew with a mother's cold certainty that it was not the high-earning figure he had presented to Tiffany and her discerning family. He was already building a lie, and I could see the cracks forming. The first dinner only solidified my dread. Tiffany's gaze, as it swept over my antique, worn furniture, my floral curtains, and my grandmother's china, was not one of appreciation but of clinical financial appraisal. She saw low value. My son, Robert, did not defend my home or offer any correction to her silent judgment. He simply smiled nervously and changed the conversation, an early sign of the emotional compromise to come. I should have stopped him then, recognizing the threat to his character. But a mother's ingrained hope is a powerful, blinding force. 1 month before the wedding, the pressure of his lie became unbearable, forcing the confrontation. He arrived that Sunday afternoon with the strained expression of a man trapped by his own fabrication. We sat under the purple wisteria vine, the symbol of his protected childhood, now about to witness his financial manipulation. "Mom," he finally admitted, unable to look me in the eye, "Tiffany and I are renting an apartment in Chelsea. It is nice, 2 bedrooms, a balcony. She is used to a high standard, and my income is not exactly what her family believes it is." The financial trap was sprung with my simple question. "How much is the monthly rent?" $3,000 a month, he stated. That figure was nearly the entirety of my monthly teacher's pension, a fixed income designed to sustain my final years. For context, the average retired public school teacher's pension in New York at that time provided a narrow margin for survival, often hovering around $3,500 per month. Robert was demanding nearly 1/3 of my entire financial safety net. "Robert, that is more than 1/4 of my total pension," I immediately countered, stating the objective, ruinous fact. He rushed forward, grasping my hands, turning the financial request into an emotional plea. He could pay $2,000, he claimed, but desperately needed my $1,000 contribution every month. He promised it was strictly temporary, necessary only until his inevitable, much-needed promotion. The core of his argument was his fear of social failure. Tiffany already informed her parents about the specific Chelsea apartment. If we move to anything cheaper, they will know I lied about my income. "Please, Mom, just 1 year. I absolutely swear to you it will only be 1 year." In that moment, beneath the peaceful wisteria, I made the colossal mistake of choosing his pride over my security. I said yes. But the most damaging condition followed. "Tiffany cannot know you are helping me. She must believe I pay for everything myself, or she will think I am a failure." Thus, my devastating silence began. Every single first of the month, $1,000 money reserved for my house's urgent repairs and my own future medication was transferred to his account. It was a $1,000 mortgage on my dignity, he promised 1 year. The financial meter, however, continued to run, steadily, relentlessly, past the agreed-upon deadline. Before this exploitation began, my love for Robert was pure and unconditional. I reflected on the years I raised him alone after his father's death, the years I worked double shifts as a teacher to ensure his education. His success as an engineer felt like my ultimate victory. When he graduated, his words, "Without you, I would be nothing," were my most treasured possession. The early years after his graduation were good. He visited me faithfully, discussing his career beneath the growing shade of the wisteria. He was independent and honorable, or so I believed. His relationship with Tiffany, however, accelerated his decline. She introduced him to an aggressive lifestyle of expensive restaurants and designer clothing, a life he could not genuinely afford. I noticed the rapid, unsustainable changes in his spending. When I questioned him, he insisted he earned enough, but my knowledge of his true salary told me otherwise. The financial performance was already underway. The request for the rent subsidy came just 1 month after their engagement. I accepted the terms, the $1,000, the pact of secrecy, because a mother's desire to protect her son's happiness is often stronger than her logic. That single act of compliance began a cycle of financial dependency and emotional distance, that would cost me $72,000 and nearly destroy my health. The next part will reveal how that secret cost me my dignity, and how my attempts to stop the financial bleeding were met with ruthless dismissal. The first year of my financial subsidization was an immediate, brutal exercise in forced financial austerity. Every single first of the month, the $1,000 transfer was executed with ritualistic, depressing precision, draining a massive 1/4 of my fixed pension. To compensate, I became ruthless with my budget. I ceased buying meat, opting for cheaper, bulk starches. I stopped all purchases of new clothing. Crucially, I canceled my membership to the seniors' gym, a modest expense that provided essential physical therapy and social connection. It is for my son. It is entirely temporary, I repeated, justifying the continuous self-denial. Robert maintained the emotional facade, calling me weekly to ask, "How are you, Mom?" But we strictly avoided all mention of the money, upholding the toxic pact of silence. His visits, however, began to dwindle rapidly. Sunday visits were replaced by explanations of Tiffany's mandatory brunch plans, client dinners, or family obligations. I rationalized this emotional abandonment as the natural consequence of a new marriage. The profound, agonizing truth of my diminishing value arrived on Mother's Day of that first year. I spent the day preparing my famous turkey chili, setting my table with my best embroidered linen, buying fresh market flowers. Robert had confirmed his attendance. "We'll absolutely be there, Mom." At 2 o'clock. The chili was ready, but 2 o'clock passed, then 3, then 4. At 5 o'clock, his call came. He was canceling. Tiffany had organized a sudden, required lunch with her family, and he assured me, "I can't say no." He hung up before I could utter a single word. I sat alone at the perfectly set table, staring at the cooling chili. I did not weep over the food. I wept because I finally understood the stark hierarchy of his life. I was now an easily discarded option, secondary to the preservation of his image within Tiffany's social sphere. This type of emotional neglect, where a parent's value becomes conditional and easily dismissed, is a recognized pattern that creates profound feelings of rejection and isolation, often referred to as emotional abandonment. He returned the following week with flowers and chocolates, offering the predictable, manipulative apology. "You know how Tiffany is with her demanding family." I forgave him, but the internal foundation of my trust had cracked. The year of payments finally concluded. I gathered my courage and called him, initiating the conversation he actively avoided. "Robert, 1 year has now passed. The rent agreement." He was immediately defensive. "Mom, things are financially tight. I just paid Tiffany's expensive tuition. Give me a few more months." When I asserted my own needs, my house repairs, the leaking water heater, he shut down the conversation with a cold, absolute dismissal. "Mom, please, do not make me feel guilty. I am under enough intense pressure as it is." He hung up, leaving me with the shattering certainty that my well-being was utterly irrelevant to him. Yet, I continued the transfer. A mother's commitment to her son, even when being exploited, is a powerful, difficult bond to sever. The second year mirrored the first, marked by increasing emotional distance and mounting financial exhaustion. By the third year, Robert barely visited. When I suggested visiting them, the excuses were immediate and absolute. Remodeling, migraines, prior obligations. One afternoon, I acted on impulse and showed up unannounced at their Chelsea apartment, the apartment I was actively funding. Tiffany opened the door, dressed in silk, holding a glass of wine, her tone instantly conveying unconcealed annoyance. "Oh, mother-in-law, what a stunning surprise." She made no attempt to invite me in. Robert was absent, out with friends. When I offered to wait, she coldly replied, "I have my own friends arriving shortly. Another day would be better," and immediately closed the door. I was left standing in the elegant hallway, clutching my bag of bagels, feeling completely expelled from my own son's life. Later that night, Robert's text arrived. "Mom, Tiffany informed me you stopped by. Please, you must let me know beforehand next time." She felt extremely uncomfortable. She felt uncomfortable. My pain, my humiliation, was utterly unaddressed. I did not reply. The following day, I made the automatic, ruinous transfer of $1,000. The difference between genuine generosity and destructive foolishness was now clear. I had been foolish, enabling a lie that was actively consuming my future. The fourth year of payments introduced the final, permanent cost, my health. My degenerative arthritis worsened, demanding $200 per month for physical therapy, a cost I could not afford alongside the $1,000 rent subsidy. I canceled the therapy, actively choosing Robert's financial image over my own physical mobility. Lois, my sharp-eyed friend, noticed the change, my increasing pain, my refusal of the affordable Key West trip. She demanded the truth, forcing me to confront the painful reality that I was living the life of a pauper so my son could perform the life of a rich man, without any trace of gratitude. Robert's visits became sporadic, his time governed by Tiffany's urgent social calendar. The climax of the financial abuse arrived when Robert requested the final, ultimate sacrifice. He announced his immediate ability to cover the rent himself, effective next month, a small, brief moment of hope. But this was immediately followed by the final, devastating request. He needed a $4,000 loan for the down payment on a $50,000 Acura SUV. The true cost of his ambition was now clear, and the only remaining available funds were in my late husband's sacred $20,000 savings account, reserved for my desperate old age. His request, his insistence that I use the sacred account, was a final, unforgivable violation. When I truthfully refused, citing my need for that final protection, he dismissed my fears with brutal cruelty. "Oh, Mom, always so overly dramatic. You are not going to die tomorrow. When you are old, I will be the one to care for you." He hung up, leaving me trembling with a cold, pure rage. The final, psychological blow landed 2 weeks later. Tiffany's social media post showed her smiling proudly in front of the brand new Acura MDX, purchased entirely without my $4,000, without touching the sacred account. Robert never needed the money. He simply wanted to quantify the exact limit of my sacrificial love. When I finally drew a boundary, he simply found an immediate alternative. That night, sitting under the wisteria, my terror of losing him entirely forced me back into silent compliance. I continued the monthly $1,000 transfer, but the silent, complete death of my dignity began my slow, painful resurrection. The following part will detail the mounting evidence of Robert's deceit, my forced investigation into the truth, and the agonizing realization of the scale of the financial betrayal. The 5th year of my continued payments was dominated by the visible signs of my exploitation, those truths that the heart desperately sees but refuses to process. I kept the $1,000 monthly transfer active, a robotic commitment that had completely depleted my personal financial cushion. I was now subsisting entirely paycheck to paycheck, meticulously rationing every dollar, denying myself even the smallest comfort. My knees, relentlessly reminding me of the canceled physical therapy, worsened dramatically, necessitating the use of a cane for any extended walking. My friend Lois, now a vigilant observer, insisted I seek medical attention. "Rebecca, this is beyond normal aging. You must have this checked." The diagnosis remained advanced degenerative arthritis, and the doctor again prescribed a necessary treatment costing $300 monthly. I took the prescription, placed it in my purse, and immediately dismissed the financial necessity. That $300 was the precise difference between eating a poor diet and a substantial one, between paying my electricity bill and sitting in the dark. I left the clinic with my cane, clutching the unfilled prescription, acutely aware that my body was now paying the irreversible price for my 6-year-long financial sacrifice. Yet, I was still an unwilling participant in the lie. 2 weeks after the doctor's visit, Robert initiated contact with an unexpected call. "Mom, how are you? Did you receive my text?" "What text, son?" I inquired. "I sent a text 3 days ago asking you to deposit the money early this month, on the 30th instead of the 1st. Did you not check your phone?" His tone was impatient, annoyed, treating me not as his mother but as an incompetent financial clerk who had failed a critical administrative duty. The message was there. "Ma, deposit on the 30th, please. Have to pay something urgent." "I did not see it, son. I apologize. The banks are already closed today. I can execute the transfer first thing tomorrow morning," I explained. "Mom, I need that specific money today. Can you not perform an online transfer?" His frustration was clear and absolute. "Son, I do not possess the knowledge for those things online. I always conduct the transfer physically at the bank," I responded. I heard a deep, impatient sigh of complete frustration. "Fine, forget it. I will secure a loan from a friend. But please, tomorrow, without fail." He terminated the call abruptly, without the simple courtesy of a verbal goodbye. I looked at the silent phone, feeling a cold spark of rage ignite within me. Is this the depth of the contempt he reserved for me now? After 6 years of silent, unconditional financial support, this was the nature of his gratitude, impatient demand, and absolute dismissal. The following day, while waiting at the bank to execute the $1,000 transfer, I overheard a conversation that served as a cruel, cold documentary of my life. Two elderly ladies were discussing their own financial exploitation. "My son borrowed money for his business and never repaid me," one stated. "Oh, honey, adult children take massive advantage," the other responded. "My daughter extracted money from me for her wedding and now barely speaks to me." I froze. Was this how the world saw us? As mothers systematically exploited by their own ambitious, self-interested children? No, I told myself desperately. My situation is fundamentally different. I am actively helping Robert because he genuinely needs it. It is temporary, he promised. But the seed of doubt, planted by Robert's constant evasion and his callous behavior, was beginning to germinate. I executed the $1,000 transfer, but this time, a small, persistent voice within me whispered, "This is fundamentally wrong." 2 weeks later, my friend Lois cornered me at a small neighborhood diner. She watched as I ordered the cheapest soup option while she ordered the much more substantial chili. "Why do you always order the cheapest item?" she demanded. "Rebecca, you cannot conceal this from me. What is truly happening with your finances?" In that simple, noisy diner, the dam of my silence finally, violently broke. Tears fell without permission. "Lois, I cannot possibly continue this any longer." I told her part of the truth. I was assisting Robert with expenses. It was a temporary, necessary arrangement. "How long have you been assisting him?" Lois asked, her voice quiet but piercing. 5 years, I confessed. 5 years, she repeated, the sound loaded with disbelief and immediate, cold comprehension. "And when precisely is he going to stop requiring your assistance?" "Soon. He absolutely promised me it would end soon." Lois looked at me with a profound mixture of sadness and judgment. "Rebecca, my dear, that is not an act of assisting. That is active financial support for a fully capable adult. And the most egregious part is that you are actively destroying your own life to maintain the illusion of his. Does he know you are canceling your essential medication to give him this money?" "No," I whispered. "I do not want to worry him." "Worry him?" she repeated, incredulous. "Rebecca, you are the one using a cane. You are the one sacrificing your health. And you are worried about causing him a moment of mild concern? A son who genuinely loves his mother does not leave her without her prescribed medication. He does not force her to live the life of a pauper while he performs the life of a rich man." I still desperately attempted to defend the moral integrity of my son. "Lois, you simply do not comprehend the social pressure. Tiffany comes from a family with substantial money. Robert must maintain a certain, impressive level of affluence." Lois's final words were a painful, unavoidable statement of pure fact. What if, Rebecca, she already looks down on him? What if she is entirely aware he cannot sustain that financial level, and that is precisely why she is exploiting his dependency on you? Her statement hung in the air, a devastating accusation without an immediate, easy answer. He does not know I am in this desperate financial state. My inability to answer her core question, "And why do you refuse to tell him the truth?" was the final confirmation of my failure. I could not sleep that night. Lois's words echoed. "He does not know. Why do you refuse to tell him the truth?" I made a decision. I would no longer be passively blind. I would investigate. The next morning, I used my old computer to search online for the exact building where Robert lived. It was an elegant, modern residential complex in North Chelsea, featuring a professional doorman, an exclusive gym, and a rooftop garden. I searched for the current rental rates. My heart began to accelerate. Rents for apartments there ranged from $2,500 to $4,000, dependent on the size and floor. Robert had definitively stated the rent was $3,000, that he paid $2,000, and I paid the final $1,000. But what if that figure was itself a complete fabrication? I immediately did something that filled me with profound shame, but was absolutely necessary. I composed a text message to Robert, an attempt at a subtle, non-confrontational information probe. "Son, what a sheer coincidence. My friend Susan is actively searching for an apartment in Chelsea. Do you happen to know the current rental rate in your specific building?" Just to provide her with a reference point. The answer arrived 3 hours later. $3,000 or $3,500. It varies significantly based on the floor and the precise view. His answer was vague, evasive, and entirely imprecise. "And how much exactly do you pay?" I immediately insisted. 2 entire days passed without any form of reply. Finally, the text arrived. "Mom, I do not remember the exact amount. Tiffany handles those particular things. Why are you so curious?" "Just curious," I replied. There were no further messages. That night, beneath the wisteria, which was beginning its slow descent into autumn, I realized the awful, unavoidable truth. My son was actively lying to me. I did not yet possess the precise details, but I knew the foundation of our 6-year financial arrangement was built on a series of elaborate, intentional lies that I had willfully chosen to ignore. A week later, the evidence became brutally visual. I was walking near Rockefeller Center when I spotted Robert. He was seated on the outdoor terrace of an extremely expensive restaurant, one of those places where a single breakfast costs more than my entire weekly grocery budget. He was with Tiffany and another couple. They were all laughing, drinking expensive mimosas, their table laden with rich food. I stood on the pavement below, hidden in the rush of the pedestrian crowd, watching. Robert looked genuinely happy, relaxed, and wealthy. And I was down below, clutching my cane, dressed in my old worn clothes, my knees radiating pain, my bank account critically empty. He never saw me. I watched until they requested the check. I saw Robert pull out a golden credit card and pay the substantial bill without a single visible hesitation. They rose, impeccably dressed and elegant, and walked off laughing toward Fifth Avenue. I took the public bus home, gripping my cane, feeling the terrible, compressed pressure of an impending emotional explosion. That night, I retrieved 5 years of my old bank statements. I took out an old calculator and began the simple, devastating addition. $1,000 per month, times 12 months per year, times 5 full years. The total was $60,000. $60,000 of my pension, my savings, my future, my health, and my dignity, poured directly into my son's lie. And he was casually spending hundreds of dollars on mimosas in expensive restaurants. I rested my head heavily on the table and wept, not just for the lost money, but for the blindness, the foolishness, and the complete annihilating failure of a mother's love. But through those tears, a new, powerful, cold emotion began to rise. An emotion I had never directed at my son before: rage. The following part will detail the ultimate final investigation I undertook to expose the precise depth of his financial deception, culminating in the painful, necessary confrontation. Rage is a powerful, transformative feeling, especially when it is directed at the person you have loved most fiercely your entire life. It feels like a cold, constant fire in the chest, making every breath shallow and uneven. For 3 sleepless nights after calculating the devastating sum of $60,000, the total cost of my 5 years of compliance, I tossed and turned. I was consumed by the stark reality of what that sum represented. The surgery I could have afforded for my knees, the travels I had dreamed of, the home repairs I desperately needed, and the simple dignity of a secure old age. Instead, I had financed an illusion. The realization was absolute. It was a colossal, intentional lie, sustained for half a decade, costing me my health, my peace of mind, and my future. But a persistent, cold-blooded need for absolute factual certainty remained. I did not know the entire truth, and before I could act decisively, I needed every single detail of Robert's deception. One morning, I made a definitive decision. I would actively and personally investigate the true cost of that apartment. I would not ask Robert again. I would find out myself. I dressed in my best, most professional clothes, applied a minimal amount of makeup, and, in a rare expenditure, took a taxi directly to the Chelsea building. It was an essential cost for an essential truth. I arrived at the address. The building was far more luxurious and imposing than I had imagined from Robert's evasive descriptions. It featured a uniformed doorman, a polished marble lobby, decorated with expensive, exotic tropical plants, and an undeniable air of effortless, high-end wealth. I immediately felt small, out of place, and desperately poor in my worn coat. "Good morning," I said to the doorman, managing a polite, steady smile. "I am interested in potentially renting an apartment here. Are there any current units available?" The doorman, a man in his 50s, responded with professional courtesy. "You would need to speak directly with building management, ma'am, but I believe we currently have a couple of availabilities. Could I give you the contact information?" "Before I involve the management company, I need a simple estimate of the price," I explained, trying to sound like a serious, prospective tenant, just to ensure it is comfortably within my realistic budget. "Of course, ma'am. It is quite competitive for this area," he offered, leaning in conspiratorially. "The 1-bedroom units are currently around $1,800. The 2-bedroom units, which are the most common and popular layout, are approximately $2,200, he continued. The larger, 3-bedroom units, or those with private terrace access, are more expensive, ranging up to $2,800 or $3,000. The world tilted and went silent. $2,200. The two-bedroom apartment, the size Robert had described, cost $2,200. And what exactly does that price include? I managed to ask, striving desperately to keep the tremor from my voice. That price covers the building's essential maintenance fees, water and gas expenses, he explained. Tenants are only responsible for their personal electricity consumption. I thanked him, gave a polite nod, and left the entrance immediately. I had to sit down on a nearby street bench, fighting the immediate, powerful urge to faint. The real, verifiable rent for a standard two-bedroom was $2,200, not $3,000. Robert had lied to me about the absolute foundational number. He had told me the total rent was $3,000, and that he paid $2,000 while I covered the $1,000 difference. The true difference was monumental. If the rent was $2,200, he was actually paying only $1,200, while I was paying $1,000. This meant my $1,000 subsidy was not a minor percentage of a large expense. It was nearly 45% of the total cost of their housing. And the $72,000 total was not just subsidizing their living, it was covering almost half of it. The logical implications were worse. If they had one of the cheaper, standard $2,200 apartments, Robert was consistently overcharging me by $800 per month, skimming the difference. If this was the case, my money was not paying for rent. It was funding their extravagant lifestyle. I returned home on the public bus, feeling a profound, deep sickness, the physical nausea of absolute, total betrayal. Upon arriving, I performed a final, shaming, necessary act. I accessed Tiffany's social media profile. She was one of those individuals who meticulously documented every single facet of her fabricated, flawless existence. And there it all was. The blatant, visible proof of my 6-year sacrifice converted into their public luxury. There were photographs in expensive, exclusive restaurants with captions like, "Date night with my love, so grateful." There were constant images of new, designer clothing, retail therapy, Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue. There were photographs from expensive, luxurious trips, Miami, Los Angeles, Aspen. We desperately needed this rejuvenating break. Blessed life. And, of course, the gleaming white Acura SUV. Thank you, my love, for always fulfilling your promises to me. Each photograph was a searing, painful stab. Each caption was a mocking confirmation of my profound foolishness. While I was subsisting on rice and cheap beans to save money, they were eating expensive lobster. While I was canceling my medically necessary physical therapy, they were casually vacationing in Aspen. While I wore the same simple clothes I had for years, she was constantly acquiring designer handbags. And all of it, every single part of it, was directly subsidized by my meticulously saved teacher's pension. The emotional depth of the betrayal became crystallized in a single, recent photo of Tiffany with her mother and her sisters. The caption read, "Thank God for blessing me with a family where I have never lacked for anything. I grew up surrounded by love and abundance, and now my husband gives me the exact same incredible life. Sacred, blessed, family is everything. Abundance, love, family, and me? Where was Rebecca Miller, the source of $72,000 of their abundance? I was utterly non-existent in their narrative. I was invisible. I closed the phone and cried until the tears could not come anymore. That night, Robert called, attempting to return to his usual casual transaction mode. "Mom, how are you? Just a quick reminder that tomorrow is the 1st of the month. The deposit is due." Not a single inquiry about my health, my life, or my pain. Just the demand for the monthly obligation. "Robert," I interrupted, and my voice, when it came out, sounded fundamentally different, hard, steady, and entirely cold. "I need to speak with you immediately. This cannot wait." "I truly cannot right now, Mom. Tiffany and I are actively going out. Can this not wait until another day?" His impatience was immediate. "It is absolutely essential," I asserted, giving him an ultimatum I never thought I possessed the courage to deliver. "You come to my house tonight, or there is absolutely no deposit tomorrow. You make the necessary decision." A long, shocking silence followed. I could feel his profound surprise, his anger, and his immediate calculation through the phone line. "Are you seriously threatening me?" His silence screamed. "I am merely stating I need to see my son," I replied. "Is that a threat?" "Fine," he snapped, the sound of pure frustration. "I will be there tonight, around 8 o'clock. "I will be waiting," I replied, and hung up first. I was left shaking, not from fear, but from a profound, unprecedented feeling. Power. For the first time in 6 long years, the financial power was finally, decisively, in my hands. The entire truth was about to be laid bare. The following part will detail the brutal confrontation where I present the evidence of the $72,000 lie and deliver the final, uncompromising ultimatum. The hours leading up to the confrontation passed with agonizing slowness. I meticulously prepared the scene, laying out the undeniable evidence of Robert's 6-year financial deception. I collected all my past bank statements, the thick bundles documenting every $1,000 transfer. I retrieved the notebook where I had noted every single payment, and most crucially, the calculations of the $72,000 total. I made coffee, knowing the conversation that was about to take place would be the most bitter of my entire life. At precisely 8:30 in the evening, Robert arrived, characteristically late. He walked into my modest Brooklyn living room with an undisguised look of profound annoyance, as if my demand for his presence was an outrageous personal sacrifice on his part. "I am here," he stated, his arms crossed, demanding an immediate explanation. "What exactly is so urgent?" I offered him no seating. I remained standing, leaning on my cane, holding my thick stack of financial papers. The power dynamic, for the first time in 6 years, was entirely reversed. "How much is the exact rent for your Chelsea apartment?" I demanded, my voice cutting and entirely devoid of motherly warmth. He went immediately pale. "What? What kind of question is that? How much does it cost?" "It is a straightforward question," I insisted. "You already told me. $3,000. "That, Robert, is a complete and absolute lie," he stammered, his composure beginning to unravel. "What do you mean, a lie? Are you going to actively tell me what I pay now?" "Yes, I am. I went to your building. I spoke with the doorman," I revealed. The doorman's statement, delivered with documentary precision, became the instrument of his downfall. The standard 2-bedroom apartments there cost precisely $2,200 per month. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with the recognition of his complete exposure. Robert opened his mouth, then closed it, his face flickering through panic and sudden absolute fury. "Mom, that is the base price. We have the special apartment. We pay more because ours has a private terrace." "And do you have a terrace, Robert?" I challenged him directly. "You never told me about a terrace. And you have never, not once in 6 years, invited me to see this apartment that I have been actively helping to finance. In 6 years, I have never once set foot in the place you built with my money. Why? Because Tiffany is ashamed of me? Is she embarrassed for her poor, working-class mother-in-law to visit her fancy, subsidized apartment?" "It is not that," he stammered, struggling desperately to construct a new, believable fabrication. "It is just that she... She what? Explain it clearly to me, Robert. Explain why I have given you $1,000 every month for 6 long years, a total of $72,000, and you treat me like an absolute stranger." I slammed the stack of bank statements down onto the table. $72,000. You acted as if I was counting it. "Of course, I was counting it," I yelled, the rage finally given a voice. "It is my final, hard-earned money. It is my only pension. It is my protected future. Do you possess even the slightest idea of the things I could have done with $72,000? Do you have any idea what I sacrificed?" Robert slumped heavily into a nearby chair. For the first time, he was entirely speechless, the shame finally visible. "I had plenty," you assumed. "Do I appear to possess plenty?" I demanded, gesturing around my modest, worn living room. "Look at my house. Look at the life I am forced to live. Look at my cane. Do you know the precise reason I now rely on this cane? Because I have advanced arthritis and I could not financially afford the necessary $300 monthly treatment? Do you know the exact reason I could not afford the treatment? Because I was giving you the crucial $1,000 every single month." "I genuinely did not know that," he whispered. "And why did you not bother to ask me? Why did you not once care to inquire?" I pressed him relentlessly. "The only thing you cared about was the deposit arriving punctually every first of the month. You turned me into a passive, functional ATM machine," I continued, my voice raw with the agonizing reality of my betrayal. "You promised me this would last for only 1 year. 1 year, Robert, 6 years ago. And here I stand, still actively paying for your lie, for your vanity, for the costly illusion of your social status for Tiffany and her judgmental family. Mom, I always intended to pay you every penny back," he insisted, his voice broken. "With what money, Robert, if you are actively living far beyond your legitimate means? If every dollar you genuinely earn is immediately spent on maintaining a false image that is not real, when will you repay me? When you purchase another $50,000 SUV? When Tiffany acquires another expensive designer handbag? I revealed the final, crushing piece of evidence. I saw her social media. I saw the expensive restaurants. I saw the extravagant trips. And I am here, subsisting on rice and cheap beans, wearing old, mended clothes, physically unable to pay for my essential medicine. The tears finally fell, but they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of pure, necessary rage, of profound liberation, of the long-suppressed truth finally having its voice. You know the ultimate thing that genuinely hurts me the most? I confessed. It is not even the sheer amount of money. It is the fact that you deliberately made me invisible. You reduced me to a transactional source of funds. You stopped seeing me as your mother. I am no longer Rebecca, the woman who raised you alone, who sacrificed everything for your education, who loved you more than her own life. Now, I am simply a monthly obligation. Robert covered his face with his hands, his entire body shaking. I am profoundly sorry, he finally choked out, his voice utterly destroyed. I am so sorry, Mom. You are completely right. I took monumental advantage of your love. I allowed this situation to spiral completely out of control, but I genuinely did intend to pay you back. With what viable money, Robert, when your life is built on a foundation of sand? I saw the financial reality of your life. I'm going to change. I promise you everything will be different now. He stood, approaching me, attempting to initiate a familiar, comforting hug. I took a firm, definitive step back, leaning heavily on my cane. No, I commanded, my voice absolute. Do not touch me. Not until the core situation is actually and permanently changed. What exactly do you require me to do? He asked, desperate and lost. I require you to stop the lies. I require you to immediately speak with Tiffany and tell her the full, complete truth. All of it. That I have been paying nearly half of her rent for 6 long years. That you do not earn the income you led her to believe. That her perfect life is fundamentally built on the active sacrifice of your own mother. The moment of truth was met, not with courage, but with cowardice. Mom, I cannot possibly do that. She will absolutely leave me. And if she leaves you purely because of the financial truth, I asked, the final, cold question hanging in the air. What kind of woman is she? And what kind of marriage do you truly possess? Robert offered no response. In that devastating absolute silence, I grasped the core of the betrayal. He preferred the dangerous continuation of the lie to the immediate risk of losing Tiffany. His image was more important than my physical and financial well-being. The son I thought I knew no longer existed, or perhaps never existed at all. Go, I told him softly. Just go, Robert. I need to be entirely alone now. He left without a final glance, and the door closed with a definitive hollow sound. I stood alone amidst the evidence of my sacrifice, surrounded by the papers, the accounts, and the final, brutal proof of 6 years of unreciprocated love. I felt the winter chill descending, but I also felt a deep, profound sense of having finally spoken the truth, of having finally, decisively defended myself. The beginning of my resurrection was purchased at the price of the complete destruction of our old relationship. The following part will detail the days of silence, the surprising, devastating revelation of Tiffany's complicity, and the final, necessary emotional severing. The days immediately following the confrontation were characterized by a profound, heavy silence. Robert did not call. I did not call him. The first of the month passed, and I did not execute the $1,000 transfer. Then the second, the third, and the fourth day followed. My phone remained entirely silent. For 6 long years, my life had been structured around that monthly financial transaction, and now, with its abrupt cessation, I expected to be consumed by guilt. Instead, I felt a peculiar, fragile peace, a peace purchased at the high cost of emotional rupture. On the 5th day, my friend Lois arrived. "Rebecca, what transpired? You look fundamentally different," she noted, entering the living room. I finally spoke with Robert, I confessed. I told him the absolute truth, every single detail. Lois embraced me tightly. "Oh, Rebecca, how do you feel now?" "I am not entirely certain," I admitted. "Empty, yet liberated. Deeply sad, yet absolutely resolute. All of those things simultaneously." We sat down with our coffee, and I recounted every painful detail of the confrontation. When I finished, Lois, who rarely showed deep emotion, had tears in her eyes. "You performed the only necessary action, Rebecca. Even though it is excruciatingly painful, you performed the only correct action. On the 7th day, my phone finally rang. It was a simple text message from Robert. "Mom, we urgently need to talk. Can I come over tomorrow?" I replied immediately with a single direct word. "Yes." The following day, he arrived alone. He looked significantly tired, strained, and visibly haggard. We sat in the living room, neither of us possessing the immediate vocabulary to commence the devastating conversation. "I spoke with Tiffany," he finally confessed, his voice heavy with resignation. My heart immediately seized. "You told her the entire truth?" "Yes, I told her every single thing, that you have been assisting me with the rent, that I have systematically lied to her about my actual income for 6 years, and what was her reaction?" Robert looked down, unable to meet my gaze. She became profoundly angry. She is deeply disappointed. She insists I completely lied to her. She claims I intentionally made her appear ridiculous in front of her entire family. "And what did she say about me?" I pressed him, needing to quantify the nature of her judgment. She stated, "Why did she not tell me sooner? She should have actively included me in the entire financial conversation from the very beginning." My blood instantly boiled. Why did I not tell her? "You explicitly requested I maintain the absolute secret. You begged me not to tell her, claiming it would destroy her perception of you." "I know, Mom. I know I requested the silence," he replied, the plea in his voice desperate. "But she is profoundly furious. She claims I betrayed her trust." "Furious with whom, Robert? With you or with me?" "With both of us, naturally," he admitted. "The mother is always the convenient secondary culprit. And now, what is the immediate resolution?" I asked. "Tiffany says she requires significant time to seriously consider her future. She is actively contemplating moving back to her parents' Upper East Side house for an indefinite period. She insists she cannot trust me. She says that if I lied about the foundation of our entire life, she cannot comprehend what else I have lied about." There was a genuine, raw tremor of pain in his voice. For a fleeting moment, I felt pity, but the memory of the canceled physical therapy immediately solidified my resolve. "Robert, perhaps this is the essential necessity you require. Perhaps it is finally the crucial time for you to build your marriage on the foundation of absolute truth, rather than unsustainable lies." "A good thing? You perceive this as a good thing? A good thing that my wife is actively considering leaving me?" he demanded, incredulous. "A good thing that honesty has finally been introduced," I stated simply. "You do not understand, Robert. For 6 long years you systematically lost me. You stopped visiting. You ceased asking about my well-being. You reduced me to a mere monthly obligation. You lost me a very long time ago. You simply refused to acknowledge the loss." "Mom, I never intended for this to happen," he insisted. "But you permitted it to happen, and now you are facing the inevitable consequences." Robert walked toward the window, the classic posture of avoidance. "So, what is the ultimate conclusion? You are absolutely not going to assist me financially anymore?" he asked, the real desperation finally revealed. "Not even for a few extra months, while I attempt to sort out this marital crisis?" "No, Robert. The financial arrangement is irrevocably over. And how am I supposed to physically pay the rent on a $3,000 apartment now?" he pleaded. "You will find a significantly cheaper place. You will actively secure a second job. You will sell the $50,000 SUV. You will execute the actions that every responsible, financially stable adult is required to perform. You will live entirely within your legitimate means." "That is effortlessly easy for you to state," he muttered bitterly. "And it is equally easy for you to execute," I countered. "I performed that exact act for decades. I raised you entirely alone on a restricted teacher's salary. I lived strictly within my means, without pretense, without luxury, and always with absolute dignity. You possess significantly more resources than I ever did. You have a high-value education, a stable career, and your youth. I possessed only sheer willpower and profound, destructive love." Robert stood in silence for a long time. Then, he looked at me with a profound mixture of pain and sudden, unexpected rage. "You know what, Mom? You may be entirely correct. I did take significant advantage of your generosity. But you also bear a major portion of the total blame. You never once said no. You never established any boundaries. You habituated me to your perpetual giving, your sacrifice, and now you demand I change my entire reality overnight." His words struck me with the terrible force of truth because they contained an undeniable element of fact. I had enabled the exploitation. I had said yes when my very survival demanded I say no. "You are absolutely correct," I conceded. my voice flat with the weight of my own error. I allowed you to treat me this way. I effectively taught you that my love was boundless and entirely unconditional. That was my single greatest, most catastrophic error. But a profound mistake can be actively corrected, and I am correcting my mistake now. By entirely cutting me off? He challenged. No, by decisively letting you grow. By permitting you to become a responsible, independent man who is forced to confront the direct consequences of his own dishonesty. Robert shook his head, the final bitterness rising. You are simply unbelievable, Mom. Now abandoning me is reframed as for my own good. I am not abandoning you. I am actively letting go. There is a fundamental, profound difference. He walked toward the door. Before exiting, he turned one final time. I hope you find the peace you are looking for. Because of your decision, my marriage is completely falling apart. No, Robert, I stated, correcting him definitively. Your marriage is collapsing because of the fundamental dishonesty, because it was constructed on a foundation of sand and lies. I merely removed the financial support that masked what was already irrevocably rotten. He slammed the door upon his departure. I was left alone in my living room, trembling, his final accusation. Because of you echoed relentlessly in my head. Was I the villain of his life? No. I knew I was not, but the accusation still inflicted a sharp personal wound. The days stretched into weeks of absolute silence. I did not hear from Robert. I made the conscious decision not to seek contact. For the first time in my life, I respected his absolute silence, as much as he had consistently ignored my essential needs. I immediately redirected my $1,000 monthly payment toward my own life. I used the money to finally fill the expensive arthritis prescriptions. The pain in my knees slowly, mercifully, began to subside. I slept better. I began my slow, deliberate process of personal healing. The following part will detail the ultimate final truth regarding Tiffany's complicity and the emotional act of writing the final, decisive letter to Robert, confirming the end of the old relationship. The weeks of silence provided a necessary, cold space for my healing. I began to spend the reclaimed $1,000 monthly on myself. I finally filled the essential arthritis prescriptions, and the agonizing pain in my knees started to abate. I could walk marginally better. I slept better. My peace was purchased at the expense of our broken relationship, and I chose the peace. On the third week of silence, my phone rang. The number was unknown. Mrs. Miller? The voice was female, polite, and entirely unfamiliar. Yes, this is Rebecca Miller. Who is this calling? This is Mary, Tiffany's sister. My blood ran immediately cold. Why would my son's sister-in-law, a member of the Upper East Side aristocracy, be contacting me? Nothing is wrong, please do not worry. I just required a private conversation with you. Could we possibly meet? I agreed. I needed to know the reason for this breach in the social firewall. We arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop near my Brooklyn home. When I arrived, Mary was already seated, possessing the same impeccable, expensive elegance as Tiffany. Yet, in her eyes, there was a noticeable difference, a slight, unreadable tension that suggested something genuine, something more human than her polished veneer. Mrs. Miller, thank you for agreeing to come, she said, rising slightly. We ordered coffee, and the silence was heavy, awkward, and profoundly charged. I am uncertain how to begin this conversation, she finally confessed. Tiffany is completely unaware I am here. If she were to discover this meeting, she would be intensely angry with me. Then why, Mary, did you feel the necessity to come? I asked directly. Because I urgently need to convey something to you. Something I believe you absolutely deserve to know before you make any decisions. I braced myself, sensing the final, ultimate betrayal. Tiffany informed me about the rent crisis, Mary continued, lowering her voice slightly. About the money you transferred to Robert. Everything. And I was entirely shocked. Not because Robert required financial assistance, but because Tiffany acted in front of us as if she was completely innocent and unaware. My heart began a frantic, painful acceleration. What exactly do you mean by that statement? Mary took a deep, steadying breath before delivering the final, devastating blow. Mrs. Miller, Tiffany did know. Perhaps not from the absolute first month, but for approximately 3 years now, she was absolutely aware that you were actively helping with the rent payments. The world momentarily warped. 3 years. How can you possess this certainty? Because she informed me herself, approximately 2 years ago during a family dinner, Mary explained. She was complaining that Robert's actual earnings were not matching her expectations. When I asked how they managed to afford the extremely expensive apartment, she replied entirely casually, "Oh, his mom helps us with part of the cost. $1,000 a month. It is the absolute least she can possibly do after everything Robert does for her." I felt a profound physical jolt, a punch to the core of my dignity. The absolute least she can possibly do? This was not merely knowledge, this was an active, casual contempt for my sacrifice. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. "And why are you telling me this devastating truth now?" "Because when the entire situation exploded, Tiffany played the role of the utterly betrayed victim in front of my family," Mary stated, her voice thick with her own moral disgust. She painted Robert as the sole liar who had hidden this terrible secret from her. And while Robert was wrong to lie initially, Tiffany had been entirely complicit for years. She actively played the role of the innocent victim to secure sympathy from my parents. Mary's final assessment was a cold, necessary justice. "Mrs. Miller, I do not condone Robert's manipulative behavior. Lying is wrong, but my sister is not innocent. She knew the source of the money. She actively enjoyed your sacrifice and never possessed the basic decency to thank you, to acknowledge you, or to include you in her life. She enjoyed your money while simultaneously treating you with contempt. That is fundamentally wrong. Thank you for finally providing me with the absolute, complete truth," I managed to reply, the words heavy with resignation. Mary departed. I remained in the coffee shop for nearly an hour, staring blankly at my empty cup, processing the colossal scale of the treachery. Tiffany knew. She knew and actively exploited the situation. She knew and actively treated me as a nuisance. She knew and never offered a single word of gratitude. Every piece of my pain, my isolation, and my sacrifice was suddenly clarified by this final, hideous revelation of mutual complicity. That night, sleep was impossible. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I made my final, non-negotiable decision. This time, there would be no more phone calls, no more desperate confrontation. It required a formal, written statement of conclusion. I opened my old computer and began to type a letter. It was a formal, definitive farewell to the old relationship. "Robert, 32 years ago, I brought you into this world. I raised you entirely alone after your father's death. I provided you with everything within my capacity: education, love, and core values. I mistakenly believed that was sufficient to form a man of honor. I was fundamentally incorrect. Not because you are inherently bad, but because I protected you to an excessive, destructive degree. I taught you that a mother's love knew no limits, and you actively learned that you could perpetually take without ever giving back. I taught you that sacrifice was noble, and you learned that my sacrifice was your fundamental right. For 6 years, I gave you $72,000. I do not regret the monetary loss. I profoundly regret permitting you to systematically erase my visibility. I regret maintaining your shameful secret while you constructed a life based entirely on intentional dishonesty. Today, I possess the full knowledge that Tiffany was also entirely complicit. I know that she was actively aware for years that I was funding her life. Yet, she treated me with contempt, and you stood silently, allowing it to happen. I am not writing this letter to issue a complaint. I am writing this to say goodbye. Not goodbye to my son forever, but goodbye to the flawed relationship we have had, the one where I perpetually gave and you perpetually took, the one where I systematically diminished myself and you actively flourished, the relationship where my pain was completely invisible to you. If you ever genuinely desire to know your mother, not your passive source of money, but Rebecca Miller, the woman I am, my door will always be open, but I will no longer beg you to acknowledge my existence. I will no longer passively wait for crumbs of your attention. I will never again sacrifice my inherent dignity for the continuation of your comfort. I truly wish you the best. I sincerely hope you build an honest, sustainable life. But you will execute that rebuilding without my financial support and without my complicit, destructive silence. I love you. I will always love you. But now, I also love myself. Your mother, Rebecca Miller. I printed the letter immediately. The following day, I drove to his building. I did not ring the expensive doorbell. I simply placed the sealed, formal envelope directly into his mailbox and departed. I walked through the opulent Chelsea neighborhood, leaning slightly on my cane, but feeling lighter than I had in 6 years. The heaviest burden I had carried, the crushing weight of the lie, was finally gone. I immediately redirected my energy into my own essential self-care. I hired a professional contractor to finally repair the leaking water heater in my home. With Lois's physical assistance, I painted the living room in a bright, cheerful color. I cooked my famous turkey chili solely for myself, and savored every single bite. My physical therapy began to yield noticeable results, the pain in my knees steadily diminishing. I slept soundly for the first time in years. 3 weeks after delivering the letter, the silence finally, definitively broke. The following part will detail Robert's response, the collapse of his marriage, and the beginning of a long, necessary path toward a genuine reconciliation. 3 weeks after I deposited the letter into Robert's mailbox, my phone finally rang. It was Robert. His voice was subdued, fragile, and utterly devoid of the impatient arrogance I had become accustomed to. "Mom, I read your letter." There was a long, painful pause. "Do you genuinely feel everything you wrote in that letter?" "Yes, Robert," I replied simply. "Every single word is the truth." Another profound silence followed. I am entirely unsure what to say in response. "You do not have to say anything immediately. You simply need to think about the truth you read." He finally confessed the devastating news. "Tiffany and I have separated. She is gone." My heart tightened, but I preserved my composure. "You mean it? You loved her." "She says she cannot continue living with someone who systematically lied to her about his financial stability," he explained. "The irony is profound, isn't it, considering she knew the truth for years?" "Yes, I know that she knew, Robert. Mary told me the complete truth." "Are you angry at Mary for revealing the secret?" he asked, surprised. "No, I am profoundly grateful to her. Someone finally introduced genuine honesty into this entire corrupted situation." "And what is your current plan?" I asked. "I have already moved out of the Chelsea apartment," he confessed. "I secured a much smaller, significantly cheaper apartment in a different neighborhood. I have sold the Acura SUV. I am forced to start over entirely from scratch. I am relieved to hear that you have begun the necessary changes. Mom, I am deeply sorry for every single thing I forced you to endure. Truly, I was a terrible, ungrateful son. You were not entirely terrible, Robert. You were profoundly lost," I corrected him, drawing a crucial psychological distinction. "There is a significant difference. And will you ever truly forgive me?" "I have already forgiven you, Robert," I stated with certainty. "Forgiveness is an essential requirement for me, not for you. I release the resentment so I can move forward with my own life." "So, does this mean we can attempt to start over? We can rebuild the relationship?" he asked, a fragile hope entering his voice. "We can rebuild, Robert, but the new relationship will be fundamentally different. I will never again be the mother who unconditionally says yes to everything. I will be the mother who speaks the truth, even when the truth is painful and difficult." "I accept that new condition," he replied immediately, "and I recognize that I must earn your trust back, not with empty words or promises, but through sustained, visible actions." "Do not promise me anything, Robert. Just execute the actions." We terminated the conversation. For the first time in many years, I felt a genuine, mature hope, not the blind, destructive hope of before, but a hope grounded in absolute, hard-won reality. The months that followed provided the crucial evidence. Robert honored his commitment, not with grand, sweeping gestures, but with small, consistent, sustained actions. He resumed visiting me every single Sunday. He arrived with bagels from the local market, the simple kind I genuinely enjoyed, and he never arrived empty-handed, expecting me to provide the food. We actively cooked together, just as we had when he was a small boy. Crucially, he never mentioned money. He never once asked for financial assistance. I waited for the inevitable request, for the old pattern to reassert itself, but it never arrived. Slowly, tentatively, I began to believe that the transformation was genuine and absolute. He shared details of his new life. He was actively working extra hours. He had sold many of the unnecessary, expensive items he had acquired to maintain his false image, and he was learning to live authentically, with significantly less. He confessed a profound irony one afternoon while we were sitting under the wisteria, which was once again beginning to bloom with purple flowers. "You know what is truly ironic, Mom?" he mused. "When I possessed the expensive apartment, the SUV, and the extravagant restaurant lifestyle, I was perpetually stressed, constantly paralyzed by fear of financial exposure. Now that I live simply, within my genuine means, I sleep far better. I feel free." I was profoundly happy to hear this essential admission, not because I enjoyed his financial difficulty, but because he was finally, decisively, learning the fundamental lesson of self-sufficiency. However, life has a cold, inevitable way of delivering justice, and Tiffany was about to discover the full price of her complicity. My friend Lois, who maintained a morbid curiosity, still followed Tiffany's social media account. "Rebecca, you absolutely must see this recent post. Lois exclaimed one afternoon, showing me her phone. The images of Tiffany's life were dramatically different. The expensive restaurant photos were entirely gone. The hashtag blessed life was nowhere to be seen. In its place was a solitary photo of Tiffany in a simple cafe, accompanied by a long, melancholic caption, "Life sometimes teaches you that superficial appearances are not everything." I have learned the excruciatingly hard way that a life constructed entirely on lies, even pretty lies, will eventually and inevitably collapse. I am currently in a necessary process of painful personal reconstruction, and I am profoundly grateful to those few who have remained by my side during these unexpectedly difficult times. Lois had investigated the situation. After separating from Robert, Tiffany had immediately become engaged to someone else, a purported entrepreneur who was genuinely wealthy. However, 3 months into the engagement, the entrepreneur discovered that Tiffany had fabricated multiple, significant details about her life, her age, her educational background, and even her current professional employment, which she had lost months earlier. "The supreme irony is complete," Lois remarked. She abandoned Robert for being a liar, and then she was herself abandoned for the exact same reason. I felt no joy in her pain, but I acknowledged the cold, objective balance of the universe's scales. Weeks later, Mary called me again. "Mrs. Miller, I wanted to provide you with an update. Tiffany is experiencing an extremely difficult period. She is living back with my parents. She lost her prestigious job, and the new boyfriend entirely abandoned her. She is now saying she made a massive mistake with Robert, that he genuinely loved her, and she tragically failed to appreciate it." "And what is her expectation now? That Robert will return to her immediately?" I asked. "I do not know her expectations, but she is visibly different, significantly less arrogant, more humble in her demeanor. I believe life is finally teaching her a profound, necessary lesson." "Life does not hit people, Mary," I philosophized, having gained a hard-won perspective. "Life merely teaches. The feeling of being hit is the profound sensation we experience when we absolutely refuse to learn the essential lesson." That statement was true for Tiffany, and it was true for Robert. Tiffany sowed deceit, contempt, and superficial appearances, and was now reaping loneliness and disappointment. Robert sowed manipulation and negligence toward his mother, and lost his marriage and his elevated social status. He was forced to begin completely from zero. And I, who sowed love and systematic sacrifice, was finally reaping the most valuable currency of all, my profound peace, my recovered physical health, and my absolute self-respecting dignity. Everyone, in their own way, had finally paid their unavoidable price. Robert continued his slow, meticulous climb toward redemption. His visits were now genuine acts of affection, not transactions. One Sunday, he looked at me with a serious expression. "Mom, Tiffany texted me again. She wants to talk. She says she profoundly regrets her mistake and wants to reconcile. What should I do?" My heart was steady. "And what, Robert, is the desire of your heart?" "I do not know the answer," he confessed. "Part of me is still emotionally attached, but another part of me knows it would be a critical mistake." "Why would reconciliation be a mistake, Robert?" "Because we were never built on truth. Not her with me, not me with her, and neither of us with ourselves. We constructed our entire relationship on fragile sand, Mom, and when the necessary storm finally arrived, it collapsed entirely." I felt a profound, deep pride in his hard-won, honest assessment. "And what is your final reply to her? That I must continue to grow on my own? That maybe, far in the future, we can be simple friends, but that for now, we both urgently need to heal separately." That decision, Robert, is genuinely honest, and honesty is the new foundation of your entire life. "I hope so," he whispered. "I am learning that honesty is the key to my freedom." The following part will detail the ultimate fulfillment of my life, the quiet justice served to all parties, and the profound, peaceful arrival of the next generation. 2 full years have now passed since that definitive December night, the night Robert asked, with cold entitlement, "How does it feel to be completely useless, Mom?" That question, and my shocking response, became the surgical instrument that finally carved my life free from his destructive lie. Today, I am 61 years old. My hair possesses more gray, but my spine is straighter, and my resolve is absolute. My knees still ache occasionally, but I have entirely discarded the cane, and my house is painted in cheerful, bright colors. My wisteria, the silent witness to my greatest mistake, is now more beautiful than ever, bursting with a deluge of purple flowers every spring. My heart, though scarred, is entirely at peace. Robert has kept his word, not with grand gestures of restitution, but with continuous, small, and consistent acts of genuine care. He arrives every Sunday, now with a purpose of presence, not transaction. He actively fixes small things that break around my house, not because I ask him to, but because he genuinely desires to contribute. He no longer operates with the hurried, anxious energy of a man living a lie. He began bringing Sarah, a young woman he met at his company, to the Sunday lunches. Sarah is a public school teacher, just as I was simple, kind, and profoundly grounded. I chose not to invest emotional expectation, but simply observed his behavior. What I observed was honesty. He treated her as his true equal. He did not attempt to impress her with fabricated wealth. He told her the entire, raw truth about the failed marriage, about his own terrible mistakes, and about the long, difficult process of rebuilding himself. One afternoon after Sarah departed, Robert confessed, "Mom, Sarah is completely aware of the financial situation. She knows every detail about the rent payments and the deception." "And what was her reaction to the complete truth?" I inquired, expecting judgment. "She stated she is relieved that I finally learned the essential lesson, and that she actively wants to know you not out of obligation, but because she is genuinely interested in the woman who survived my selfishness. I profoundly like her," I stated, smiling honestly. "I do too," Robert replied. "And the greatest part is that with Sarah, I can finally be entirely myself. I do not have to perform the constant pretense. That, Robert, is the profound essence of true love," I affirmed. "When you can reveal your worst failings, and the other person does not abandon you, but actively supports your evolution into your best version." The slow, quiet process of justice continued to unfold for Tiffany. My friend Mary continued to provide periodic updates. Tiffany finally found stability in a non-glamorous, standard office position. She had abandoned the pretense of social media and was committed to her therapy. Mary relayed Tiffany's own hard-won insight. "Tiffany says you were entirely correct. A life built entirely on superficial appearances will inevitably collapse, and she was forced to collapse completely in order to rebuild a life that is genuine." I felt no vengeance, only a sense of profound, objective balance. I realized that Tiffany, in her own way, was simply another lost soul, attempting to fill a deep emotional void with excessive material acquisition and external validation, just as Robert had, and just as I had, in my own destructive way of giving. 2 months ago, Mary and I took our long-delayed trip. We traveled to Boston with 3 other retired colleagues. We laughed, we walked, we reminisced, and for the first time in 6 years, I did not experience a single moment of financial anxiety. I could afford the journey. I had learned the ultimate survival lesson. Self-care is not selfishness, it is absolute necessity. One Sunday afternoon, Robert and Sarah lingered after lunch. We were sitting under the wisteria when Robert looked at Sarah, and their eyes met with a profound, shared meaning. I instantly knew what was about to happen. "Mom," Robert began, his voice thick with unbridled joy, "Sarah and I have major news to share with you." "We are going to be parents," Sarah announced, her smile radiant and absolute. I was speechless. The tears that came were not of sadness or stress, but of immediate, powerful joy. I rose and hugged them both tightly. "I am going to be a grandmother," I whispered through the tears. "And we desperately want to ask you something," Robert continued. "We want you to be an integral part of this child's life, not from a distant obligation, but up close. We want them to hear your stories, and for you to teach them the profound lessons you taught us. But this time, Mom, you will be entirely free to simply enjoy the experience. And if you ever require anything at all, financial or physical, promise us you will tell us immediately," Sarah added, her sincerity absolute. "Because you are an essential member of this family, and in this family, absolutely no one is left alone or silently struggling." I nodded, utterly unable to speak, crying and smiling simultaneously. That night, I sat alone under the wisteria, looking up at the vast, silent stars. I reflected on the entire arduous journey. The pain, the tears, the $72,000 lost, the years that would never return. Was the terrible sacrifice ultimately worth it? The answer was clear and uncompromising. Yes. Not because of the money or the sacrifice, but because of the profound, hard-won lesson it forced me to learn. I learned that genuine love is not quantified in dollars or in self-annihilation. It is quantified only in mutual respect, in absolute honesty, and in equal reciprocity. I learned that being a good mother does not mean blindly saying yes to every destructive demand. It means teaching with firm boundaries, with unyielding truth, and with complete dignity. I learned that sometimes you must actively lose a relationship to win your life back. You must let go of a child to allow them the necessary space to grow into a man. I learned that it is never, ever too late to begin a new life. At 59, at 61, and at 80 as long as breath remains, there is an absolute opportunity for profound change. If my story has reached your ears, if you have listened to this entire document of a life reclaimed, I want you to internalize one final truth. You are not alone. If you feel yourself being systematically rendered invisible, if you are perpetually giving until you have nothing left to sustain yourself, if someone, your adult child, your partner, your family makes you believe that your only fundamental value is what you can offer them, then listen to my final command. You have explicit, complete permission to say no. You have permission to establish firm, non-negotiable boundaries. You have permission to prioritize your own physical and emotional self-care first. This is not selfishness. It is absolute, necessary survival. You are human, and you profoundly deserve respect, love, and absolute dignity. No matter the title of the person exploiting you, absolutely no one has the fundamental right to make you invisible. Your inherent existence matters. Your pain matters. Your happiness matters. Your life matters. If I found the courage to reclaim my voice at 59 after years of silence and financial devastation, you possess the same power. Begin today. Begin now. Say no when your sanity demands it. Say yes only when the assent is genuine and true. And never, ever again diminish yourself so that someone else can feel artificially large. Life is tragically short, and you deserve to live it entirely whole. We will finally embark on the Key West trip, the one I had to cancel for Robert's lie with Robert and Sarah. It will be perfect, not because of the luxury, but because it will be entirely honest. Thank you for listening to my complete truth. May you find your voice, may you reclaim your dignity, and may you never ever again allow yourself to be made invisible.